Welcome back to the Treasure Fox Wizard Variety Hour. Once again, today we'll be doing some readings, have a little chat, and then play some overtone music. Keep it short and sweet and simple. Thanks for virtually connecting in these times of isolation, and for everyone that's doing their part to isolate, and for the rest of humanity. Really appreciate that. It's a beautiful day here. It snowed yesterday, so it's kind of surprising that it's sunny and nice out. I think today is March 23rd, and we're going to read once again a short passage from Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer. To get us started, I highly recommend this book. On one side of the world were people whose relationship with the living world was shaped by Sky Woman, who created a garden for the well-being of all. On the other side was another woman with a garden and a tree, but for tasting its fruit, she was banished from the garden and the gates clanged shut behind her. That mother of men was made to wander in the wilderness and earn her bread by the sweat of her brow, not by filling her mouth with the sweet, juicy fruits that bend the branches low. In order to eat, she was instructed to subdue the wilderness into which she was cast. Same species, same earth, different stories. Like creation stories everywhere, cosmologies are a source of identity and orientation to the world. They tell us who we are. We are inevitably shaped by them, no matter how distant they may be from our consciousness. One story leads to the generous embrace of the living world, the other to banishment. One woman is our ancestral gardener, a co-creator of the good green world that would be the home of her descendants. The other was an exile, just passing through an alien world on a rough road to her real home in heaven. And then they met, the offspring of Sky Woman and the children of Eve, and the land around us bears the scars of that meeting, the echoes of our stories. They say that hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, and I can only imagine the conversation between Eve and Sky Woman. Sister, you got the short end of the stick. The Sky Woman's story, shared by the original peoples throughout the Great Lakes, is a constant star in the constellation of teachings we call the original instructions. These are not instructions like commandments, though, or rules, rather. They are like a compass. They provide an orientation, but no map. The work of living is creating that map for yourself. How to follow the original instructions will be different for each of us and different for every era. In their time, Sky Woman's first people lived by their understanding of the original instructions, with ethical prescriptions for respecting hunting, family life, ceremonies that made sense for their world and of their world. Those measures for caring might not seem to fit in today's urban world, where green means an advertising slogan, not a meadow. The buffalo are gone, and the world has moved on. I can't return salmon to the river, and my neighbors would raise the alarm if I set fire to my yard to produce pasture for elk. The earth was new then, when it welcomed the first human. It's old now, and some suspect that we have worn out our welcome by casting the original instructions aside. From the very beginning of the world, the other species were a lifeboat for the people. Now we must be theirs. But the stories that might guide us, if they are told at all, grow dim in the memory. What meaning would they have today? How can we translate from the stories at the world's beginning to this hour, so much closer to its end? The landscape has changed, but the story remains. And as I turn it over again and again, Sky Woman seems to look me in the eye and ask, in return for this gift of a world on Turtle's back, what will I give in return? It is good to remember that the original woman was herself an immigrant. She fell a long way from her home in the sky world, leaving behind all who knew her and who held her dear. She could never go back. Since 1492, most here are immigrants as well, perhaps arriving on Ellis Island without even knowing that Turtle Island rested beneath their feet. Some of my ancestors are Sky Woman's people, and I belong to them. Some of my ancestors were the newer kind of immigrants, too. A French fur trader, an Irish carpenter, a Welsh farmer. And here we all are, on Turtle Island, trying to make a home. Their stories of arrivals with empty pockets and nothing but hope resonate with Sky Woman's. She came here with nothing but a handful of seeds and the slimmest of instructions to use your gifts and dreams for good. The same instructions we all carry. She accepted the gifts from the other beings with open hands and used them honorably. She shared the gifts she brought from Skyworld as she set herself about the business of flourishing, of making a home. Perhaps the Sky Woman story endures because we too are always failing or falling. Our lives, both personal and collective, share her trajectory. Whether we jump or are pushed, or the edge of the unknown world just crumbles at our feet, it's 5 p.m., we fall, spinning into someplace new and unexpected. Despite our fears of falling, the gifts of the world stand by to catch us. As we consider these instructions, it is also good to recall that when Sky Woman arrived here, she did not come alone. She was pregnant. Knowing her grandchildren would inherit the world she left behind, she did not work for flourishing in her time only. It was through her actions of reciprocity, the give and take with the land, that the original immigrants became indigenous. For all of us, becoming indigenous to a place means living as your children's future mattered, to take care of the land as if our lives, both material and spiritual, depended on it. We'll stop there for now from Braiding Sweetgrass and pick it up again next time. I wanted to read another piece that's come in from a friend, and it is What Psychedelics Told Me About the Coronavirus, an empowering message to humanity from Aya. No matter how complex a question I may have, when I take it to psychedelics, I always receive an answer. So when the coronavirus pandemic kicked into high gear, I brought the subject to my trusted mentor, ayahuasca, to be illuminated. Ayahuasca is an ancient shamanic plant medicine technology consisting of 3 simple ingredients: a vine, a leaf, and water. The ensuing brew is consumed in a ceremonial context and commonly referred to as the medicine. In the visionary state, downloads around COVID-19 began pouring in, and it all began with the humble teachings of a tiny little insect known as the caterpillar. Did you know that a caterpillar will consume up to 300 times its body weight per day before entering the cocoon? I share this fun fact because, as the medicine showed me, we have reached a moment in our human evolution where the clumsy, dense, survival-obsessed caterpillar stage of our collective human consciousness must finally stop mindlessly consuming and surrender to the chrysalis in which everything it has known itself to be dissolves into mush. Welcome to the corona cocoon. Yep, we are in the disintegration stage, now where all the magic happens and the next chapter of our human experience can transition into the era of the butterfly, a being that is light, free, empirically exquisite, and in service to others as a pollinator. Let me illuminate how this is far more than a nifty metaphor. Times of crisis bring a tremendous opportunity because there is a pattern interrupt to our collective habitual ways of operating, most of which are heavily anchored in excessive consumerism, habitual ways of operating, distraction, and a relationship to productivity so unsustainable it has become violent, both to our own minds and spirits, as well as to the mind, body, and spirit of our earth, which is, surprise, surprise, a sentient being as well as it has its own consciousness. The coronavirus is the great equalizer. As the pause button on the rat race is pressed and so many things we take for granted suddenly withheld, the opportunity in the apocalypse, and just so we're all clear, apocalypse means lifting of the veil, reveals itself to those who are willing to detach from the panic enough to actually listen to a deeper truth that is emerging from the wreckage. Before I dive into what that truth is for me, the author, and of course this is all my perception but by no means empirical fact, good to know, I must first share the fundamental framework of my lens on reality so the following statements have context. In the arena of personal development, there's a term called shadow work that is very important to understand. The baseline worldview here is that everything in our reality exists because of a complex interplay between light and shadow, thus creating a vast field of polarity in which consciousness can manifest itself. Through an esoteric lens, this interplay is captured by the yin-yang symbol, which exemplifies that each polarity contains within it a speck of its opposite. From a quantum physics perspective, we can explain the same phenomena through the language of vibration of frequency. We can measure the amount of light particles contained within each frequency. The lighter or higher the frequency, the faster the oscillation, the more information or light is contained within it. The darker or denser the frequency, the slower the oscillation, the less light is contained within it. While we in our culture have generally deemed light to be good and the shadow evil, neither are actually superior or inferior. They are simply expressions of duality itself and give birth to the very nature of our human existence. Yet our judgment of these forces, which exist on the macro level of the universe as well as the micro level within each individual human being, has condemned the shadow to such a degree that it has become repressed and therefore dangerous. For any force that is repressed long enough will eventually erupt like a geyser under pressure, with equal intensity to restore the balance. Shadow work is the voluntary examination of one's own internal darkness, or to put it in more psychological terms, the excavation of our subconscious, which lacks the light of our conscious awareness and is therefore hidden from view. Most human beings on the planet have no concept of shadow work, and even those who do may not have the courage to voluntarily look into the dark crevices of their own psyche. Repressed traumas, inherited fear programs, undigested pain, and all sorts of other disturbing and uncomfortable revelations lie buried there, represented by the metaphorical boogeyman of our collective human unconsciousness. And yet, no matter how much we ignore, reject, and deny the shadow, it never disappears. In fact, quite the opposite is true. The very fear that keeps us from looking at it is the same fear that feeds it. I believe times like these are a collective wake-up call to actively participate in our shadow work or be swept away by the darkness once and for all. The coronavirus is simply the trigger to force us into being with what has been there all along. As a wave of fear permeates the collective, the shadow we've repressed for generations can no longer be ignored. Until right now, we didn't have external circumstances dire enough to bring it to the surface. And now that it's here, we stand at the crossroads. This is a choice point moment of epic proportion. Every time I participate in psychedelic experience, and especially when working with ayahuasca, I'm confronted with the same question. Do I succumb to the current operating system of victim consciousness, or do I claim my creator consciousness? Victim consciousness says I have no or very little personal power. I am at the whim of my external reality, and things are happening to me beyond my control. My fear-based ego must cling to any semblance of control it can find in order to ensure its survival, and fight for that control at all costs. I project blame externally, refusing to take responsibility for my reality. Creator consciousness says I'm infinitely powerful precisely because I'm ready to relinquish my false sense of control and trust in the greater intelligence of life and death itself. Everything I experience, pleasant or not, is a result of some form of conscious or subconscious co-creation. It is through taking full responsibility for my experience that I liberate myself from victimhood. Truly, at this stage of the game, each individual human being is confronted with a decision of which operating system to run. One is based in fear, the other in love. Whatever narrative we choose to focus on moving forward will significantly impact the quality of our human life moving forward. What a ripe opportunity for massive transformation. The stakes have never been this high. Congratulations, everyone. We are officially in the cocoon. Before I illuminate both the gifts of light and the gifts of shadow available within the corona cocoon, I want to say to anyone who has a loved one transition due to the coronavirus, my heart goes out to you. I sincerely hope that my perspective on the situation don't in any way demean the pain of your loss. I also recognize that it may feel almost impossible for many reading this to understand how this devastating event could have a major silver lining, and that's okay. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. My intention is solely to share my perspective in order to support you in making an internal choice that can have a lasting impact far beyond this pandemic, which could end up being the most profoundly valuable thing that has ever happened to you in your life. Again, it's all up to you to decide what to do with information. The reality of death. Currently, Earth is activating her defense mechanism and, like a stern mother, putting our insolent asses in time out so we may come face to face with the very thing we have been avoiding for so long, our mortality. This is also known as being grounded. I'm not just talking about being forced to confront the inevitable death of our physical bodies, but also the death of our comfort zones, the death of our false sense of security in regards to finances, food supply, healthcare, government, and international affairs. Death is really, at its core, the fear of the unknown. This is why those who are doing authentic spiritual work are going to be less affected by the crisis like the coronavirus. If you've experienced yourself beyond the physical dimension and connected to the infinite aspect of your consciousness that will continue to exist long after your body has deceased, there is no reason to fear death. The coronavirus, an invisible threat, confronts us with our relationship to the spiritual realms, which we cannot navigate with our five senses. Every time we open our Amazon boxes to pull out the next bulk order of toilet paper while wondering if the cardboard is contaminated, we are quietly confronted with the mystery of the invisible, unknown nature of reality. Examining our mortality is also an access point into more deeply understanding the biologically ingrained survival mechanisms that run so much of our day-to-day lives. Truth is, the vast majority of humans, regardless of income bracket, do not feel safe and secure in the world and are plagued by anxiety and stress because of it. Isn't it amazing that death, an initiation every single human being must face eventually, is so taboo in our culture? No wonder we ignore and suppress this fact when nothing in our modern education system addresses the subject, even in the slightest, to prepare us for it. Indigenous cultures create elaborate rites of passage for their youth to confront and even embrace the reality of death, so they may be free from the fear of it. Rituals around death were and are commonplace, necessary initiations in ancient cultures. We have lost these ways. Today, our fear of death has tampon commercials showing period blood as blue instead of red, so we don't have to face the truth. We can't even connect to the death of the animals we consume in such copious quantities. Meat-produced products are neatly shrink-wrapped and disguised with names like hot dogs and burgers, so we don't have to think about the reality of the sacrifices we so casually pull off the grocery shelf while scrolling through our Instagram feed. There is no more tangible connection to the cycles of life and death that occur in the natural world, and that connection is now ready to reawaken, bringing with it the hard yet sweet realization that nothing is guaranteed. When we truly embrace the truth that we are all going to die, that life is a profound gift, and each breath a privilege, every moment becomes infinitely precious. In the ancient shamanic healing tradition of ayahuasca, the purge is very sacred and a crucial component to getting well. Fighting the purge is hell. Relaxing into the purge, truly surrendering to it, that is the medicine. It's easy to forget, but we have some pretty serious traumas in our very recent history. Just in the last 100 years, we had 2 world wars, the Cold War, the Vietnam War, and 9/11, plus all the other violence, environmental distress, and genocide going on in the world today. Until very recently, when science began the study of epigenetics, we had very little understanding of how trauma can be passed down from generation to generation, and how it manifests itself as a disease in the body if left unaddressed for too long. Epidemics like the coronavirus are a very serious invitation for us to look at the emotional material that is surfacing as more and more warlike conditions surround us. Borders closing, mandatory quarantines, the potential of martial law, etc. My German grandmother, a World War II survivor, never had the opportunity to consciously process the trauma of her experience, which means that if we believe energy is neither created nor destroyed, only transformed, either my mother, myself, or my children will eventually have to consciously transform that energy and break the chain. I see a trauma as a zip file of information which contains valuable lessons within it. Unpacking it might feel like trying to defuse a very dangerous bomb, but if I can truly trust that the trauma is here to serve a greater purpose, and my only job is to be brave enough to really feel it fully once and for all, the suffering disappears and only gifts remain. I believe the remnants of the collective trauma that we've acquired in our human history is now ready to be purged and transmuted. And so it makes sense that we would subconsciously evoke conditions similar to those that created the trauma in the first place, only this time, instead of having to go to the front lines and fight in battle, we get to do the inner work in the comfort of our own homes. Now is the time to look at our fears and especially our scarcity programs, the not enough conversations that are happening externally in the form of not enough toilet paper, not enough supplies, not enough income, not enough hospital beds, not enough flights, are an amplified reflection of our incessant internal scarcity conversation that keep so many of us locked into the rat race of our modern lifestyles. The world is caught up with the non-essential, and yet it yearns for the essential. That's from Richard Rudd of the Gene Keys, which I highly recommend you also maybe turn to. I was part of a team that created a contemplation app called playakasha.com, and that's based on Richard Rudd's Gene Keys. Also, look up Paul Kuhn and experience Seven Senses. They're doing some Gene Keys readings and sound meditations that I highly recommend. With Erica Matlock and Josh and Eliza of the Dojo Upstate. There's a massive reset button being pushed on the financial system right now, and it is a huge opportunity to come into greater integrity with how we generate revenue. Yes, the coronavirus will have a devastating impact on small and large businesses, as millions of people are laid off due to the government-ordered shutdown, and using the example given in a recent Wall Street Journal article of the entrepreneur who invested his life in his Memphis ribs joint, only to see his customers vanish in a week. There was a hidden denied truth in that business that can no longer be ignored, which is the quality of life of the animals whose ribs were being consumed for profit in the first place. I'm not a vegan, nor do I believe humans should never eat animals, but I do believe the lack of awareness, consideration, and empathy for the quality of life and death of these animals we consume requires serious and immediate attention. And anyone who is not actively participating in the conversation of humane treatment and sustainability while making money off of meat or any other natural resource will eventually be forced to do so. Obviously, not all businesses require the death of living things, but most businesses exist to sell essentials, aka shit we don't need. And so in this purge, I see a tremendous extinction of the non-essentials sweeping across our economy. How many shipping containers full of products to stock malls and Amazon warehouse shelves are truly enriching our human experience? This may be a very unpopular opinion, but if a business dies because of the coronavirus, there's a very real possibility that A, it wasn't truly providing essential value in the first place. B, the value it was providing had an unacceptable cost to it, which was being paid for by the earth itself and also in economics, those businesses and those costs are called external costs. So something like a roll of toilet paper costs $1, but those external costs, like the shipping, the pollution, the factory without healthcare for workers, stress, no time off, all of those costs are externalized to society. And so that toilet paper that gets to you that's $1 is actually a $25 roll, or like say a toaster for $10. There's no way that all the work that went into that toaster is worth $10. Those are external, and then we, and the royal we of humanity, pay those costs. And C, the time for a new, potentially more omni-considerate creative idea is ready to express itself for those involved in that business, and it's time to innovate and move on. This topic of sustainability also ties back into the scarcity conversation, because if whatever job or venture we are accustomed to making a living from suddenly disappears, perhaps it's because a deeper purpose for our unique skills, gifts, and talents wants to emerge, and only a scarcity mindset would insist on seeing the disappearance of one opportunity as a dead end, when in truth there are infinite ways in which each individual can reinvent themselves. So many people work just for a paycheck without ever stopping and asking, what value can I contribute to the world that nourishes my soul in exchange? What is actually my full fuck yes? This is the time to ask those questions, for finally the distractions are removed enough for us to begin receiving an answer. Will it be easy? Likely not, although anything is possible. Will it happen overnight? No. True change takes time, repetition, and dedication, but a very real quantum leap can happen in the next few weeks and months, and with the internet, there's no shortage of guidance, education, and tools available to anchor in a permanent internal shift. This is also a time where we might see unprecedented acts of generosity and kindness amongst humans. Unlike all the other pandemics we've seen so far, we are all in this one together. The opportunity for the global human family to show up for each other right now is huge, and the joy of both asking for as well as receiving support is available everywhere we turn. And that reminds me of my project, the I Love You Letter project, which you can go to and be told you're authentically loved by people in many different cultures and languages. It's I Love You Letter on Facebook and iloveyoulatter.org. Make dope art. My mother and I were talking about how the coronavirus might affect arts and culture, which many would argue are inessential to human survival and were wiped out in Germany during World War II. The big difference today is technology. All you need to plug into a vibrant, abundant buffet of creativity is an internet connection and a smartphone, and within seconds you can share your voice and tune into the hearts and minds of the 3.5 billion human beings who are online in 2020. Human survival isn't just the physical component. We must nourish our emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies as well. And right now, technology is our ally in that, because it doesn't adhere to borders, boundaries, and shelter-in-place laws. I see the coronavirus unleashing a creative supernova of new ideas, visions, and voices as we start claiming our capacity to make dope, and dope stands for daring, original, personal expression art, which can manifest itself as anything from writing an epic love song to incubating a sustainable business to rearranging your pantry to reflect back to you a healthier mindset. Our contributions to the collective narrative can either be saturated with fear or drenched in compassion and optimism. Coming full circle back to the beginning of this article, now is the time to choose which operating system you will run. If you do decide to opt out of the victim consciousness and claim your creator consciousness, know that you're signing up for a deep spiritual journey into the depths of yourself. The process begins with intention. The intention to truly know yourself, to be with all aspects of yourself, no matter how unpleasant some of them might feel. We will require community and guidance on this journey, even though at the end of the day, no one can do the work for us. I've compiled a list of free resources that have been incredibly supportive on my journey, and you can find that at ffy.com/resources. The profound gift in all of this, you have been given the opportunity to see how powerful your lens on reality really is, how much it impacts your experience, how deeply it affects the quality of your life and the well-being of the planet itself. In times like these, new innovations emerge, and you can contribute right now from the comfort of your couch to a brighter future for generations to come, simply by consciously choosing to look within. Stop looking for the answer. Be the answer. And that was by Azrya Cohen Bequer. That reminds me of that part about making dope art is that I've always had these visions of like a post-monetary life, like kind of sci-fi, way in the future, in which money doesn't really serve a need. If at some point we have robots doing most of the work, AI, what would our cultural exchange be? And that exchange would have to be art. everyone would exchange the unit of value would be the art that you create. So I think this is a great time for people to take up a pen and pencil, some paints, or their laptop and create crazy amazing art to share with others and connect others. One of the other choices that we can make is this is a time of great change, and we have the opportunity to guide that change by choosing the creator consciousness. And part of that is the upcoming idea that I talked about before of taking the dystopian trope of Hollywood films and those trailers that go, in a world where one man stands, that sort of thing. And wiping away the dystopia, I'm like, we don't need to create dystopias. We live in them. We need to create the utopias. And nothing will ever be perfect. And the way to actually have everyone have buy-in is to co-create that story together. So everyone, if you see this, please record a video, send it wherever this is posted, or just hashtag it or whatever, in a world where, and tell your story of how you want to live in the future. Does it involve healthcare? Does it involve knowing your neighbors? Does it involve caring for the elderly, gardening, being a relationship to the earth? Whatever that may be, let's co-create that story together. And if everyone does their part, then we can live into those realities. So I saw something recently about the power of smiling, and it's actually, of course, really good for our brains and our psychology. And I've got this little poem. It's called Laugh. Laugh out loud. No, seriously. In an unserious way. Laugh. Go ahead. It's a friendly command for you contrary types. Laugh. It's an invitation. Laugh. It's a gift from me to you. And I want you to use this time to just laugh already. Go ahead. Laugh. Try uncontrollable laughter. Let it come out from somewhere, anywhere. Man, that shit was funny. Fuck, you're funny. Thanks. I really needed that. Here's a piece. There's a way, there's a truth. Metaphors muddy the waters. It's the unspoken, unknown, only known to you, in you. These words in your head aren't it. They never could be. It's too big, too much for mere words to convey. Look inward to your own language. It turns out, spoiler alert, that it's the only language there's ever been, and it's the only language of everything and everybody. And that's untitled, unspoken by Anonymous. Well, I hope we've had fun in the Treasure Fox Wizard Variety Hour. I'm just gonna play a little bit. And with these overtone instruments, it's best if you just close your eyes and listen. Any thoughts that arise, welcome them. Bring them in, give them some lemonade, and don't chat, just let them go back and be on their way. And just relax. Slow down your breathing to what's comfortable. Just be with yourself in the present moment, stopping time with a chime. thanks for joining us, and thank you for breathing with us and being present and going inward in this time. Thank you for being with us here at 2 Minutes. And may you have the adventure of your lifetime, exploring your inner world. And with that richness and depth and that exploration, you can come back out and truly show up for the others in need, those that need help now, whether it's a call to a loved one, writing a letter, posting some art to a friend. All these connections, these tethers, these mycelia are what connect us to the earth and to each other.